students. I am Teacher Dane and welcome to our English 10 class. Today, as we begin the first week of the first quarter, we are going to discuss a topic that will help us develop our skills in using information from news reports, speeches, panel discussions, and informative talks in our everyday lives. So, without any further ado, let's begin. For the first week of this quarter, we are going to discuss sources of information. By the end of this discussion, you will be able to attain 3 objectives. First, differentiate the 3 sources of information. Second, give some examples of these primary, secondary, and tertiary sources of information. And lastly, identify if the given item is a primary, secondary, or tertiary source. Information is news or knowledge received or given by someone. People use information to seek meanings in a variety of situations. Sometimes they use information to acquire a skill or reach a goal. Oftentimes, it is used to generate ideas. Information as available data everywhere can be found in different platforms and means such as news reports, speeches, panel discussions, and informative talks. Getting information will basically expose you not only in the pool of information, but also help you identify which details are factual and not. Information is very important in our daily lives. It can improve the quality of human life because it can be used as a learning and education media. Moreover, it helps you, students, in learning process effectively. There are various sources of information that you may use in finding significant details and data in your everyday life. Sources of information are classified into primary, secondary, and tertiary source. The context of information presented in a source is helpful in classifying information. So now, let us discuss the first source, which is the primary source of information. Sources of information are classified primary if they are authentic, which means original, and have not been subjected to evaluation or assessment. These are original documents representing unfiltered original ideas. Primary source is a term used in a number of disciplines to describe source material that is closest to the person, information, period, or idea being studied. For example, in historiography, a study of historical writing, a primary source, which is also called the original source, is an artifact, a document, a recording, or other source of information that was created at the time under study. If created by a human source, then a source with direct personal knowledge of the events being described. It serves as an original source of information about the topic. In journalism, a primary source can be a person with direct knowledge of a situation or a document created by such person. Some examples of published primary sources of information are research and thesis. On the other hand, some examples of unpublished primary sources of information are diaries, photographs, websites, video recordings, speeches, and more. Now, let us discuss the secondary source of information.
Secondary sources of information are those which are either compiled from or refer to primary sources of information. These contain organized repackaged knowledge rather than new knowledge. Information from these sources are modified, selected, or reorganized. These are usually evaluations of primary sources and information written by authors who do not personally witness the event or action.
Secondary sources are more easily and widely available than primary sources. It is difficult to find information from primary sources directly. Therefore, one should consult the secondary sources in the first instance, which will lead one to specific primary source. Some examples of secondary sources of information are first, periodicals. Periodicals are magazines or newspapers that are published regularly. Second, history. History is the record of the past. Third, commentaries. Commentaries are spoken description of an event on the radio or television that is broadcast as the event happens. And lastly, number 4, critics. Critics are reports of something that provide judgment. Now, let us discuss the last source of information, which is the tertiary source of information.
Tertiary sources serve as a collection of primary and secondary sources. Tertiary sources of information contain information distilled and collected from primary and secondary sources. The primary function of tertiary sources of information is to aid the searcher of information in the use of primary and secondary sources of information. Some examples of tertiary sources of information are bibliography, or a list of books and articles that have been used by someone when writing a particular book or article. Directory, or a book listing individuals or organizations alphabetically or thematically with details such as names, addresses, and telephone numbers. Dictionary, or a book or electronic resource that lists the words of a language, typically in alphabetical order, and gives their meaning. An abstract, or a summary of the contents of a book, article, or formal speech. An encyclopedia, or a book or set of books giving information on many subjects or on many aspects of one subject and typically arranged alphabetically, and more.
In using the information gathered, whether they are primary, secondary, or tertiary, take note of the 6 characteristics information should have. Number 1, accuracy. Information must be reliable, useful, free from flaws or errors, and of high quality. Number 2, completeness. Information must provide all the needed details. It should be able to answer the WH questions: what, who, when, where, why, and how. Number 3, timeliness. Information should be up to date, recent, or new. Number 4, consistency. Information must be consistent for it to be considered accurate and useful. Number 5, relevance. Information should suit the demand, needs, and interest of the readers. And lastly, number 6, uniqueness. Information must be distinct, clear, and definite.
This time, let us try to check if you are able to attain our objectives from this lesson by answering these questions. What are the 3 sources of information? Define each briefly. The 3 sources of information are primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. The key terms to better understand and remember primary sources are authentic, original, and have not evaluated or assessed. For secondary sources, we have evaluation, interpretation, and analysis. And for tertiary sources, we have collection, organization, and categorization. Were you able to answer the first question correctly? Very good! Question number 2 is, how many examples of primary, secondary, and tertiary sources can you give? Kindly name them. These are examples of primary sources, secondary sources, and tertiary sources. Were you able to get the answers in question number 2? Wow, awesome! Question number 3. Tell whether the given item is a primary, secondary, or tertiary source. Number 1. State of the Nation Address or SONA of President Rodrigo Duterte. Is primary source correct? Yes, very good. Number 2. English 10 textbook. Is secondary source correct? Another check. Great! Number 3. A letter of a mother to her son. Is your answer primary source? Awesome! Number 4. Encyclopedia. Is your answer tertiary source? Wow, amazing! And lastly, number 5, interview with Mayor Cory Poblete about the best practices to avoid the continuous spread of COVID-19 in Silang, Cavite. Is your answer primary source? Congratulations! I knew you would get it! Let us check if you were able to attain all the 3 objectives of this lesson. Were you able to differentiate the three sources of information? Check. Were you able to give some examples of these primary, secondary, and tertiary sources of information? Another check. Were you able to identify if the given item is a primary, secondary, or tertiary source? Another big check. Congratulations! Good job! So here ends our discussion. I hope you had fun learning this topic with me. Again, this is Teacher Dane. See you on our next lesson. Bye!